we are fortunate to live in a time when we can look around and see people who are deeply inspiring, right? There are, of course, the journalists risking their lives every day in Gaza. You recently interviewed at the DSA convention Rashida Tlaib, who is someone who is, faced just horrific threats and racism as the only Palestinian American member of Congress, and who kicks ass. She's so cool and she's so humane and just full of like life and determination, and you see people like that and it can help you move forward.
I think for people like Rashida Tlaib, there's no other option. She's forced into this position. She doesn't have the same privileges that like a white Christian person would have in a country like the United States. Like, she has to advocate for her own humanity every day, and her existence in that regard is almost a form of resistance as well. So I'm glad that we do have some advocates in Congress, and I hope that we have even more advocates in Congress and in also positions of power as well. I'm not so nihilistic when it comes to exhausting every avenue of power and using everyone that no matter how much they're worried about maintaining the same hierarchies, using anyone and everyone that I can to our advantage to build a movement. So I don't shy away from participating in electoral politics in that regard as well.
What do you think about the question of how much you should be willing to compromise? But someone like AOC, who's been deeply inspiring to me, who you've talked to as well, she's come under immense criticism for perceived accommodation with the Democratic Party leadership. Bernie Sanders, the same. Zoran Mamdani, was pressured to renounce his statement calling the NYPD racist, and he agreed to apologize for that. I kind of think that he shouldn't have done that, because I don't think they give you much credit for doing things like that. But I also understand the pressures that come under. How do you think about this question of, pragmatism when you see people really going after one of these politicians for supposedly, selling out?
You shouldn't be led by fear. I think that if you know your cause is just, you shouldn't shy away from assuming the role of leadership. And what you've described with like AOC are missteps, in my opinion. I think that, or at least that's the way I read it. They're not, and with Zoran Mamdani especially, I think Zoran Mamdani has a long-standing commitment to American foreign policy, or a long-standing critique of American foreign policy that is a lot more fully flushed out than I would say AOC's foreign policy commitments look like at her in her first campaign, as opposed to where she's at now. So I see that as a wrong move, like the kind of pragmatic approach. Some people, I think, have a more cynical, or some people assume a more cynical intention behind that sort of thing, where they think like, oh, they're getting completely captured by the Democratic Party, and they won't actually reflect radical change that is an absolute necessity right now. Having said that, only time will tell with respect to AOC and also with Zoran as well. I'm not so certain. I hope I'm right. I hope they don't actually become corporate Democrats with who have marginally better politics in terms of like moving this country in the direction of social democracy or something. But then again, I've been hurt by Bernie Sanders' inability to call what Israel is doing a genocide until after the UN decision. So who knows?
He's definitely not led on this, right? I mean, declining to endorse a ceasefire early on, he's really had to be pushed at every stage. And AOC had to be pushed. I mean, they chased her around a movie theater trying to get her to say genocide. And it's like...
Yeah, that was interesting, though, because like AOC has been more confusing for me, because in many instances she has been a lot more bold on the floor of Congress, calling what Israel's doing an ethnic cleansing campaign very early on. But then also simultaneously making decisions against Marjorie Taylor Greene's like messaging provision that she added, no offensive versus defensive weapons going to Israel. And I think that distinction is important. And I said at the time, like, AOC should be the leading voice on this in Congress. She should be the one making these provisions on bills, and not letting Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a silly person in general, outflank her on this issue on Israel. I guess my point is, I want politicians on the left to be way more on the fuck Israel tip than they have been so far. I think that is not an area that you will be punished for, no matter how fearful you are of corporate donors, and no matter how fearful you are of lobbying interests. Like, the people will back you, as we have seen with the primary victory for Zoran. I think a lot of Americans are very frustrated with Israel, and there is an expanded permission structure that many Democrats who are supposed to be on the right side of history on this issue, or at least they have been, they're too afraid to lead on this issue. And I'm frustrated. I'm endlessly frustrated by it, because it's not pragmatic. It's actually the opposite of pragmatism. I think it's silly to not lead on this immensely popular position that will single-handedly communicate your earnesty to as broad an audience as possible.
Well, it's like how not endorsing universal healthcare is portrayed as the pragmatic position, but actually that's a disaster. You need to give people something. Yes. You need to fix their problems. I mean, now that all of the mainstream human rights organizations have said this is genocide, the United Nations has released this report. Americans are actually, despite our reputation for violence, fairly humane. They don't like genocide. So taking the, I think genocide is bad position, I really think is the electorally and morally sensible position to take. Listen, to conclude here, I want to ask you, we've talked, we had our kind of inspiring little look at we discussed determination, we discussed organizing, we discussed moving forward with boldness and courage. But I want to return to the dark side, which is the forces that we're up against. I mean, you every day imbibe a lot of horrible news, and you, more than anyone, you understand the gravity of what it is we are facing in this country, which if people have tuned out, if they don't like picking up the newspaper because it's full of horrible news, they might not grasp, just how pivotal, just the stakes of this historical moment. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit, the path that we are on if we don't succeed.
There's tremendous hardship ahead, and there's already tremendous hardship for many working class Americans right now. The cost of living crisis has not been addressed at all. And there's a genocide going on, obviously. There are numerous conflicts taking place. America is losing its grip on power as the hegemonic superpower, the world police that was unconditionally the leading nation, the leader of the free world or whatever. And I think that as we move into this multipolar world, the nation has, or our leadership has, two different options. Either they try to quietly cede ground on the global stage to China and other great powers, or they harden their positions and become increasingly more belligerent, increasingly more militant, and demand tithing from our vassal states. I think it's not a secret that Donald Trump has chosen the second option there, and while doing so, unlike even the initial attempts by the Nazis when they were seizing control and seizing power, there has been no improvement, at least in the short term, for the economic circumstances of the base, and therefore, I guess that's somewhat of a positive situation because, as long as there's still economic discontent, it does feel like this is not an organized fascist movement that can completely destroy what remains of the American guardrails on theoretical democracy. But they're going to keep trying, as they have. I think that it's very obvious that this administration has a serious distaste for the First Amendment, for free speech, and they started punishing opponents of Israel, critics of Israel, because I think that was the easiest that was the easiest avenue to start this project with Project Esther under Project 2025, very clearly communicating the steps that they will take, using immigrant enforcement as a primary vehicle to deal with people, to create a chilling effect on speech, with the likes of Mahmoud Khalil and numerous others. But because they're so disorganized, and because they're so incompetent, and because they're so worried about hiring people that have the utmost loyalty to Donald Trump, but are also belligerent and incompetent people themselves, they've kind of failed on a lot of these initiatives. But that doesn't mean they're not going to keep trying. The designation of anti-fascism as a terrorist organization, and the numerous attempts to even utilize the FCC to try and silence critics of the president, no matter how silly their criticisms may seem, no matter how timid their discontent may look like. These are clear-cut attempts to silence dissent and to cripple organizing in this country, and to destroy what remains of any sort of pushback that could exist against a growing fascist wave. So we'll see where that goes, but I don't think that the liberals are aware of the dangers, or at least the party apparatus is aware of the dangers, or they just don't care. It seems like they're in full appeasement mode. They're obeying in advance, and corporations are obviously, as they have done so historically, also towing the line and moving along with the Trump administration, responding to the demands that they're making to sanitize culture, or at least move culture in the direction of a rightward shift. Not exactly certain how well that will go for them, but all that spells for the immediate American future is more censorship and more punitive measures for expressing any sort of anger or resentment towards anything that's ostensibly on the right. And so we just have to organize, and we just have to keep showing up to the best of our ability, and hope that this administration recognizes their unpopularity and cave, as they have done so already. But we can't rely on corporations, and we can't rely on the Democratic Party.
Hope you're enjoying this interview. If you want to listen to full-length current affairs interviews before they are made fully available to the public, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/current affairs and become a supporter today.